Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and we are just over half a Scaramucci away from the election. And guess what else is today? It is National Cat Day. And guess who is dressed for the occasion? There he is.
Tiki.
Tiki is riding with Biden, and he says, Happy National Cat Day to everyone. So,
go Tiki.
If it were up to Donald Trump, Tiki would have already voted as part of the 80 million people who have already voted. He's part of the Democrats for Biden. So 80 million voters have already cast their votes, and that's about 60% of all votes cast from 2016. That is fabulous. So, yay, democracy. Keep it going, keep voting, keep it up, keep it up. Tonight, we will be joined by Ron Brownstein and our Lincoln Project brethren, Mike Madrid and George Conway. We're going to have a lively, very informative state of the race conversation, so stay tuned for them. Also, talk to us as always. Hashtag Ask the Breakdown. Send us your questions. Hashtag Ask the Breakdown or live callers. We are taking them tonight. You can hit us up in the Zoom meeting. There's the ID. And we also have that same location if you want to check out our troll stomping party. If you watched us last night, you know that we have a whole Russian troll stomping operation going on. And if you want to check that out, that's where you go also. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that, and we'll check in with them later as well. And we want to hear from you, so we'll take some of your questions a little bit later. So, Rick, Tiki wants to know if you have any plans on Tuesday.
You've already got a segue? What? That one will never get old. That's never going to get old.
It's not.
Plans on Tuesday. I was going to idly lay on the couch while being fanned and eating bonbons. That was pretty much what I was planning on. But, oh, wait. We're going to be driving to the finish line on Tuesday with pushing out our last digital and other communications to folks, doing all the things the Lincoln Project will be doing through our political office to make sure that our friends and our allies are out voting. Because, folks, it's too late to mail them in now. You got to either plan for Tuesday, or you got to get ready to stand in line over the weekend for the last of the early voting. If you are going to vote on Tuesday, please make a plan in advance. Try to do it with other people while practicing safe COVID, but try to make a plan in advance so you can swap out. The lines in some of these swing states are predicted to be very long, but it is vital that you vote and you stick it out. They will not close polling stations if we have anything to say about it on election day if there are still people standing in line outside. We believe we are an American pro-democracy movement. We believe that every vote can and should and must be counted in this country. So, folks, if you're going to do it on Tuesday, strap in. It's going to be a long day. But, if you go with friends, you can plan ahead. People can go out and swap out to get food and go to the bathroom and all those other things. But it's the big day. And we've got 5 days to go. And 2020, the election of 2020 is grinding, coming in for a landing. We feel better every day about it because of the work that you folks have been putting in, the volunteer efforts, the time, the donations, the commitment you've shown across the board to win this thing. We are getting there, people. We are almost at the goal line. Stick with it. Make that plan to vote on Tuesday. If you're going to go out and finish the early voting, some states are still doing early voting as late as Sunday. Get it done.
And bring a buddy.
Other than that,
right.
Tuesday should be fine. Bring
Other
a buddy.
than that, right. Use the buddy system. Someone can stand online while you go get water, get a chair. Last Friday, my husband and I went to vote, and we really, in Virginia, Northern Virginia, and we really didn't anticipate that the line would be as long as it was. Still, because Virginia was one of the first states. They've been early voting since September 18th, for goodness sakes. So we went, it was like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on a Friday, and the line was an hour and a half long, which, compared to some places where it's been 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, but still, we've never stood in line for an hour and a half in our lives to vote. And my husband was not happy. And I did an Insta story on the whole thing because I thought it was funny. Plus I wanted to document it. And then he remembered that he had a lone lawn chair, our New York Giants chair, in the trunk of his car because he had just come from getting his oil changed. And he was sitting outside the dealership in the car on his chair, but he only had one. So we had to switch in and out of it every once in a while. And I didn't want people to think that he wasn't being a gentleman when he was sitting in the chair because, we only had one. He was much happier after we solved that. But speaking of that, people standing outside and it being inconvenient, the candidates have been barnstorming, one more than the other. But both of them were in your home state of Florida, Mr. Wilson. And Trump had some issues at his rally. Why? Because it's like almost 90 degrees still in Florida, and people were falling out left and right at his Tampa rally. And they were shooting a fire hose. They had fire trucks out there to cool people off. And he actually asked what was going on. Are they friend or foe? And he said if they were foe, to take care of those sons of bitches. What is happening? This is just out of control. The other night, people were freezing to death. Now people are at Trump events. Now people are dropping at these Trump events from heat. Super spreader events, people falling out. This is a great final message.
Tara, my home state of Florida is famous for many things. First off, the number one rule of Florida is something is always trying to kill you. And today, Donald Trump had these folks out on a tarmac or a parking lot in 87-degree weather with 100% humidity. So, of course, even in October in Tampa, Florida, where I was born and raised, it is a Borneo-like hellscape, humid jungle. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible place to be out in the hot sunshine on any day of the year, even a day in October. So these folks, this is almost inevitable. The fact that they're having to spray folks down with fire hoses to cool them off, it is just such a damn, it's a metaphor. Either freeze or burn with Trump.
Right. It's a metaphor for so many things. Let's take a look at the meanwhile.
The media runs right away. It's Russian disinformation.
Meanwhile, from Trump's flailing campaign.
Martha, McSally, Martha. Fast, come on, quick. You got 1 minute. 1 minute, Martha's sake. They don't want to hear this, Martha. Come on, let's go. Quick, 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 quick.
If you want to continue to have a fighter who is proud to work with President Trump, then I'm your girl, Arizona.
The U.S. just recorded its worst week for new cases since this pandemic began. More than 500,000 new COVID infections.
At his rally in Omaha, Trump took off on Air Force One, but his supporters were left stranded by the hangar.
It's an image that captures President Trump's whole approach to this crisis. He gets his photo op and then gets out. He leaves everyone else to suffer the consequence of his failure to make a responsible plan.
Senator, the question was, are you proud of your support for President Trump?
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona every single day.
Is that a yes or a no for President
Trump? Putting legislation on President Trump's desk.
So you're proud of your support for President Trump?
You look at the legislation we put on his desk, it's to cut Arizona taxes.
It sounds like she is proud of her support for President Trump. I'm proud to be fighting.
Oh, that McSally.
Tara, I noticed one thing in that McSally event. I'm pretty sure that's not the first time Donald Trump's told a woman she's only got about a minute.
Oh, yeah.
I had to. It was a moral imperative.
How could you not? I was good. You took it from me because I was going to say it wasn't the first time he told a woman to hurry up. Hurry up. Let's go. Let's while we are laughing at ourselves here, let's take a look at our live Zoom room happening where you can actually go. What I was talking about earlier, there they are. If you want to join our team and our secret lair, smashing bots and trouncing trolls, there they are. The Lincoln Project troll hunters here. Yeah, if you want to learn how to
Zoom room,
how to get how to get involved. I don't know if they can see us, but you can go and find out, because it's a really cool thing that we're doing here. There it is. Join into the bot stomping Russian troll hunting party that Lincoln Project has put together, just because we don't have anything else better to do now than to just hunt trolls. Add it to the arsenal. Oh my goodness. If you want to find out more, there it is, stomptrolls.com. That's where you can go and find out and be a part of the Lincoln Project Troll Hunters. All right, let's bring in our guests. Yes, Rick Wilson, guest time. We have got...
It is guest time.
Yes, it is guest time. We have senior editor of The Atlantic, veteran political journalist, and senior political analyst at CNN, one of my colleagues, Ron Brownstein, all-around smart guy. Welcome. We also have our Lincoln Project brethren, Mike Madrid and George Conway. Oh, as if there's not too much to talk about, gentlemen. Let's get right into it. Rick?
Well, folks, we are in the closing hours of a big election. I'd like to welcome Ron, Mike, and George, of course. And, there's a lot to cover. I think we ought to get right to it. What do we think is out there in the states right now? How are we feeling about the big key swing states? And then let's jump to the Senate races right after that. So...
Don't forget your disclaimer, Rick, or else we'll get yelled at.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right, folks. I need to make this clear, as I do every night. Mike and I are sitting here right next to each other without masks on because we exist in a COVID bubble. We are in a small group of people who are tested constantly. The minute we walk out of here, we'll have our masks back on. Everyone working in the studio has masks on right now. They all practice social distancing as much as possible. We all do the hand washing, and again, constant COVID testing, which someday that will end, and I won't have nightmares of having that thing jammed up my nose every 48 hours.
The worst part is when you start getting used to the nasal swab, you realize this is getting ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, right. I'm not going to make a joke about that either. I'm not going to make a joke about it. I will not make a joke about it. Ron, there's so much to talk about. We've got, early voting, interference. We have, mail-in ballots. Let's just dive right into it. Usually you and I are on together and we're being interviewed on CNN. Now I get
I'm asking you guys questions. I'm not, but I'm
right.
I'm not really sure. I'm not here to offer political advice to anybody, but I am happy to kind of look at the landscape. And the story of this race at some level is just the incredible stability of it, right? I mean, I think if Trump loses, he will want to say that it was coronavirus that did him in. But if you look at the polling averages a year ago, they weren't vastly different than they are now. They're a little worse now for Trump and worse for one group that I'll mention. But the basic structure of this race was set. You could look as far back as 2018, where you saw the Democrats making historic gains among white-collar white voters, many of whom said they were content with the economy. I mean, that's the point here. Trump is losing more economically content voters than any incumbent president before him. I mean, even before coronavirus, 20% of voters who said they approved of his handling of the economy still said they disapproved of him overall and still said they were going to vote for Joe Biden. I mean, we've never seen anything like that. I mean, in the exit poll in 2018, a significant majority of voters described the economy as excellent or good. And they still delivered Democrats these historic gains. I mean, what you've had is a pretty broad reaction that includes a lot of non-college white women, and thus, leavening Trump's advantage there about the way he has conducted himself as president. And that has just kind of rolled through. I mean, it's just kind of rolled through to 2020. The coronavirus has added the new dimension of more seniors pulling away, which is obviously important in Rick's home state of Florida, which is not something we really saw in 2018. But even in 2018, Democrats were back to 2/3 of young voters after Hillary only won 55% of them, back to sort of where Obama was in 2008. And to me, the story all across the board, and Mike and I have talked about this a lot, is that Trump has sentenced the Republican Party to a strategy of trying to squeeze bigger margins from shrinking groups at the expense of provoking the groups that are growing. And you saw an early version of the cost of that in 2018, and I think the bill is going to look even bigger in 2020. I mean, sure, can he turn out enough non-college and non-urban white voters to try to squeeze out another electoral college victory? I suppose it's possible, but when everybody else is voting, it's a lot harder to turn the turnout mix in your favor, because it's not just the numerator that's getting bigger, the denominator is getting a lot bigger too. And look at tonight, I will close with this. Harris County, Houston, Harris County, Texas is Houston. Tonight, in its 24-hour vote-a-thon, is going to pass the total number of votes that they cast in 2016, including on election day. And that is indicative of what's going to be happening in these big metros that Trump has exiled the party from.
You know, Ron, that is
Mike,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just going to say to Mike, that is something we're seeing in these early voting states, is this tidal wave of early voting. And it's modeled to lean much more Democratic than anybody would have predicted 6 months ago, that the early vote would be so intense. I mean, where are the states you're seeing the biggest impact that you think are going to be the early vote's the game changer?
Well, look, there's no question that Texas, as Ron just pointed out, is going to be one of those really phenomenally huge turnout states. And he's also right that, Trump, and he mentioned, we've talked about this a few times through the course of this year, is like, what is the strategy here? Are you seeing the same thing I am? The only strategy he is trying to do is reach out to non-college educated rural whites. The problem, as again was just articulated, is he may be successful in that, but for every one of those he's turning out 2 younger people of color, which is manifesting at the polls right now. Mm-hmm. And so you're seeing these huge numbers in the suburban periphery of Texas communities. What I will say is there are some areas like El Paso and Bexar County, high Hispanic communities that don't have the same turnout numbers. Folks, Latinos turn out on day of. They just always do.
Yes.
Late deciders, day of voters. You're going to see people at the polls of Texas, rural whites, and you're going to see a strong Hispanic turnout there. We can talk about the break, but I do believe you're going to see a very historic turnout. Now, remember, we started in North Carolina. North Carolina was the first state that started early voting, that started voting by mail. Lincoln Project was there. We were there big.
We were there early
The numbers are there, have been 400% of what they were in 2016 at this time. So look, there are going to be more rural white voters. There are. But compared to the number of people of color and 18 to 29-year-old voters, key demographics that rank strongly towards Biden, it's really not even close.
Right.
This is a Democratic vote. The only thing left at this point with 7 days or less is going to be how much of the day of vote that has become much more Republican this year than ever before. Will that be able to make up the margins? I think it's going to be really, really difficult. And I will say this, I spoke with the Secretary of State of California about an hour and a half ago. There's going to be long lines in California. There's going to be long lines everywhere.
Yep.
With social distancing and the turnout that we're getting, everybody in every state, the bluest of blue states, reddest of red states, wherever you're at, wherever you're watching, this is not going to be just a battleground state phenomenon. It's going to be nationwide. So please have a plan. Make sure your votes and just dig in for a little bit of a wait. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, it's going to be a day.
You know, George, have you voted yet?
Yes, I voted last Monday.
Yeah,
well, last Friday.
And it's unbelievable that at this point they're saying, because how slow everything is with the mail, that if you have to mail in, if you are waiting to mail in your ballot, you can't wait anymore. You have to actually physically go and drop it off, whether it's at, depending on what your state, apparatus is, which is remarkable at this point. But, during the course of this conversation, Ron has talked about how, the economy and how people felt about it, yet they still didn't vote for Trump. And people even still, they're looking at the economy. Trump has basically killed the economy since last year because of his failure in his response to COVID. We just had new jobless claims again at 751,000 people, which is it's the lowest in 7 months, but still almost twice the weekly average from before COVID. What the hell is going on here? What is Trump doing in that he's not even trying to have a response that makes sense? What is he doing in these final days?
What is he doing? He's doing the same thing he's always done. And as Ron says, the bill is coming due for it. It's not a strategy. The campaign may have a strategy of trying to squeeze out more of higher turnout from the demographic that is pro-Trump, but it's a strategy based upon necessity from the behavior of a man who has no strategy, who's purely impulsive, who is seeking the approval of crowds that already approve of him. Every other president we've ever seen has tried, successfully or unsuccessfully, to win over the people who didn't vote for them the first time. That's how you stay in office. That's how you get reelected. That you can expand your majorities that way. Reagan did it. Obama did it. But Trump can't do it because Trump wants guaranteed approval. He wants rallies when there's no campaign going on. He wants rallies that are about him and no one else. Witness what he did to McSally the other day. These rallies aren't really for electoral purposes. They're to boost his ego. And precisely because they don't serve a useful purpose, precisely because he cannot reach out by trying to persuade voters who don't ordinarily approve of him, he's locking himself out of a majority. And not only that, as has been pointing out, he's alienating and energizing the rest of the population that he demonizes because he perceives that they don't support him. And what's fascinating to me, looking at some of the articles about voting in Texas, is he's driving out these young people who haven't voted for. I'd love to hear more from our experts here. I mean, what's going on there? And I wonder, and I'm wondering about, we've been seeing these polls for 2 years that are remarkably stable, as Ron points out. But to what extent have the models behind that polling, because you can't, you have to have some perception, you have to make some guess as to who's going to show up on November 3rd. To what extent have those models presupposed anything remotely approaching what apparently we're seeing with young people coming out and other people coming out?
Ron, you can address that. Yeah, because just to preface it, you wrote an article recently in The Atlantic about this generational backlash that's coming with the GOP, and you talk about this, what's happening with young people. So go ahead. Great segue.
So first of all, this year is the most profound generational transition in the electorate since 1980. Roughly 1980, the baby boom supplanted the greatest generation, people who came of age in the Depression and World War II, as the largest generation of voters in the electorate. And they have been the largest generation ever since. The baby boom has been the largest generation of voters for 40 years. This year, for the first time, Gen Z and the millennials combined will equal the baby boom as a share of eligible voters. They won't, in all likelihood, equal them as a share of actual voters because they don't vote as high a rate. But by 2024, they are projected to equal them as actual voters. And by 2028, they will exceed them in the electorate. And not only, as you might expect in Florida or Arizona and California and Georgia, but also in Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. So this generational transition is irresistible. And it is occurring at a time when Trump has essentially tattooed the Republican Party as hostile to all of the values of these younger generations on the issues from climate to racial equity to gay rights. As I said, I mean, he faces the potential that, as in 2018, Biden, who, though hardly an inspiring figure for these younger voters, could push up the margin back to somewhere in the Obama range of 67%. And I don't think it's even inconceivable it could go a little higher than that. And if that is the case, and if the turnout pushes, there was a big increase in turnout for young people from 14 to 18. If indeed it does go up more than people expect in 20, you could have the pollsters fighting a little bit of the last war. I mean, pollsters have made a lot of efforts, as all of you know, to try to rethink their methodology, to weight more heavily for education, so they are not surprised by the number of non-college whites in particular that Trump can turn out. It's possible that all of these models are again, because the denominator is getting bigger too, that all of these models are assuming that there's slightly more college whites, non-college whites in the polling now than will actually be the case on election day. If African-American turnout recovers somewhere between its 12 and 16 level, if youth turnout is significantly stronger than 16, and if college white turnout, I believe, is going to be the highest ever recorded. I mean, it's just going to be like every single person, and for that matter, among people of color, I think everybody with a college degree is going to vote in this election. It's possible that non-college whites, which have been falling 2 points every 4 years, even in the Trump era, as a share of the vote, they might go down 3 points this time. And if that's the case, he is in an even weaker position than he looks. He has to turn out more people just to stay in place because they are falling as a share of the eligible population. He has to increase their turnout to offset that, much less to go beyond it in what he's trying to do and increase their share of the overall vote. So it's possible. Most people who are eligible to vote in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania and don't vote are, in fact, non-college whites. So as you know, he has a pool to work with in those states. I know Mike and I have talked about this before, but when everybody else is voting, and your margins among those groups are slipping just a little among the women and the older ones in them, I think it's awful hard to repeat what you did last time.
Yeah, I think that, Ron, if that is exactly on point, is, the peak younger voting turnout in the last 25, 30 years was weirdly Bush Dukakis at about 18%. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to exceed that number this year. And I think that their number is going to probably be somewhere in the high 60s, low 70s against Trump.
Yeah.
So that combination with seniors coming off, a few points of seniors coming off the top, and this college tidal wave, which, Mike and I would talk about the, college women being basically, the core of our some of our targeting, but we've seen college men dropping off.
The college men number
faster than we ever expected.
I mean, in the CNN national poll yesterday,
it's really remarkable.
Yeah, the CNN national poll yesterday, they didn't publish this number, but they did give it to me. Biden was at 55% of college white men. Okay, that is not possible for a Democrat. And that's where he is. And there are a number of states where it's true.
Well, and you couple that.
And it really is.
You couple that
with
where Biden is with college educated white women.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine that Biden doesn't win this given those numbers. They're extraordinary. Actually, we should take a look. And this could be why college educated women and even non-college educated women are breaking toward Biden. Let's take a look at Trump and his lovely gallantry.
We're not going to have a socialist president, especially any female.
I called her a pig, a degenerate.
Martha, come up just fast, quick. They don't want to hear this, Martha. Come on, let's go. Quick.
They said, how are you going to change the pageant? And I said, I'm going to get the bathing suits to be smaller and the heels to be higher.
You imagine the sex with this troubled
Yeah, you're probably right. She's probably deeply troubled and therefore great in bed.
Back in the day.
How come the deeply troubled women?
Yes.
Deeply troubled.
Right.
They're always the best in bed.
Do you actually change diapers?
No, I don't do it. It's not my thing. There are a lot of women out there that, demand that the husband act like the wife.
Putting a wife to work is a very dangerous thing. I mean, we'll do an educational program here, okay?
She gained a massive amount of weight, and it was a real problem. We had a real problem.
I don't want to sound too much like a chauvinist, but when I come home and dinner's not ready, I'll go through the roof, okay?
Suburban women, will you please like me?
Oh my goodness gracious. George, you've had your share of encounters with Trump and these folks during this entire thing. When you see that, does it remind you of times where you were just like, this guy is the worst?
Well, I mean, my direct exposure to him hasn't been all that great, but there's just stuff in there that I'd never seen before, frankly.
Oh, really?
And I just, the stuff about changing diapers and he's just the worst nightmare. I don't know what to say about it.
Rick.
Look, those things are like a tiny selection of Donald Trump's just horrifying behavior. And for a while, the idea that this transgressive character, this crazy guy he played on TV was not really Trump, and that someday he would grow into the job of president, it's obviously untrue. It is one of the many, 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 many reasons that, I like to say in this country, you saw with the vote with women in 2016, they got a separation from the GOP. In 2018, they got a divorce. In 2020, they want a restraining order against this guy. He is poison with female voters. He is poison.
One of the best things this year on Twitter has been following Ron Brownstein, because every time one of these clips pops up, he goes, is this kind of the outreach that Republicans are engaged with Republican women? Do you really think they're going to associate with this? It's just such a broadcast of like, get out of the party. You were right to leave in 16. You were right to leave in bigger numbers in 18. and it shouldn't be a surprise that we're polling at the numbers that we're at coming into this general election.
Can I ask a question of you guys? I mean, it's sort of a point and a question. You know, if you think about Biden, though, Biden is essentially a candidate who is designed to try to reach the voters who are not moved by the questions of Trump's character. I mean, what we saw in 2016 was there was a limit to how far that could go, particularly among blue-collar white women, older blue-collar white women. And, you know, Hillary Clinton ran a lot of ads showing, you know, middle-class, white-collar families in Columbus, Ohio, you know, looking at, is this what you want to see on TV? Biden has kind of, you know, is a very different candidate in that sense. He's not about maximizing the outrage against Trump. You know, I think I saw the Nazi flag in one of the images before. You know, that I think, you know, I kind of question that in American politics at any point, especially given who is potentially moving further away from Trump. And it is voters who may not like his character, but don't find it dispositive in their thinking. And I'm interested in your guys' thinking about that. I mean, Biden has spent he hasn't campaigned that much, but when he has campaigned, he's kind of been in the Eries of the world and, you know, small town, blue collar America, where you have voters who, whether or not they think Donald Trump is, you know, a moral exemplar, that isn't really that important to them. It's more important to them what you are going to deliver for their lives. And I'm just interested in your thought, as you've done all of this great research and put on all of this advertising. Are you finding that it is the moral case against Trump or the material case against Trump that more moves the last voters you're trying to reach?
The last voters, that's a different story.
Yeah, the last
bulk
voters.
was COVID.
I was going to say yes. It's both of those, Ron.
It's both of those.
Look, when the Lincoln Project began, the whole idea was we could get to this 4% number, this Bannon line number, with these suburban college-educated women. We thought we could press the case and get even more of them to get us the numbers that we wanted. But then COVID happens, the mismanagement, the incompetence, and what we start to see is 65-plus voters starts to move, right? This isn't a mid-March, April timeframe. I think you and I even talked about this. Rick and I talk about it every day with the development of new COVID messaging and strategies and what states we're going to be pressing the case in. That's really what brought some of these Sun Belt states into play. It's why Texas is has moved into play, right? You've got Governor Abbott mishandling the case of the COVID case because Trump is asking him to, and 65-plus voters respond. It's why we're at, you know, a huge shift in Florida at this moment. Arizona, right?
Arizona.
Suburbs and retirees completely mishandled. But then, to your point, and we've talked about this a lot, the divide in the Republican coalition is directly correlates to education. And so what we started to see is these cultural issues also began to shift. After the George Floyd murder, some of the messaging that we were talking about was really polarizing the Republican electorate away from Donald Trump when he was doubling down on law and order messaging and defending Confederate statues and the Confederacy. All of this was creating this massive wedge. So in many ways, the answer is yes, yes, yes. All of those demographics, when we saw the opportunity, started to move away just marginally. And it's why we're sitting in states in Florida at a plus 13 with Republicans leaving Donald Trump and supporting Biden. That's 3.5 times what we were expecting from that state. And basically every one of the dozen battleground states were well over, like double this 4% goal that we were trying to get to. And that in large part is why we're not talking about 6 or 7 battleground states. We're talking about 12, 13, 14 battleground states.
One place that I'm watching very carefully, Ron, is the donut of the 20-some counties around Atlanta. That whole northern part of the clock, say from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock on the Atlanta suburbs.
Cobb and Gwinnett.
Those are highly educated areas.
Diverse.
Cobb, Gwinnett, absolutely. So those counties are breaking so hard for Joe Biden that it is almost impossible to keep up with the model, because that is a highly educated arc around Atlanta. And those folks are breaking from they're going to shatter the GOP, which used to have an enormous advantage with those northern tier suburbs. So Atlanta Metro, call it roughly 60+% of the population, voting age population. You're going to end up with a 70-30 split among white college-educated women, Republican and Democrat combined, against Trump. It is going to be astounding.
Yeah. Can I say one other thing about this too? Just a little bit of insight for our viewers. One of the really remarkable things about chasing these demographics as they present themselves, most political action committees and political groups will say, oh, there's an opportunity. Let's go raise some money, do some polls, do some focus groups. Then we'll come up with an ad concept. 14 days later, they're trying to chase these demographics down. I've got an inventory of like 150, 200 ads that Rick's run. So we're just like literally choosing stuff, and it's up within 24 hours in targeted areas, going social media, hitting these small slivers, and they're moving voters state by state. So thank you, Rick, making my job a lot easier. We don't have to say what the message is and where we need to go. I'm literally just going to the virtual bookshelf and pulling all these ads that have been run and ready to go for months that we've got an analytical background on. And that's no one's ever done that before. And it's just because
you give me the targets, I drop the bombs. There we go.
And that's how the sausage is made in the Lincoln Project ad factory.
Yes,
Ron,
pretty much.
Before you go, I know you have to go. I just wanted to ask you about voter suppression and how that's impacting things. I interviewed you a couple months ago on my podcast about the early voting and voter fraud and how this would impact things. And here we are 5 months later. What have you been seeing about the impact of some of these voter suppression efforts that we're seeing going on here?
Well, I think, in many ways, some of them are backfiring. I mean, without question. I mean, people in Texas and Georgia are basically saying, if you're trying to tell me not to vote, I'm damn sure I'm going to vote. I'm going to find a way to do it. I mean, Harris County, 5 million people, one drop box for the mail ballots. I mean, the most obvious kind of voter suppression you can imagine. And yet, as we said, they're going to pass their total 2016 ballot total today. Probably as we're speaking, it's happening. I mean, when we check Twitter and we get off, it probably will have happened. To me, I mean, this is really, and we've talked about this is really indicative of the longer term proposition here, though, which is that I don't think it's just Trump. I think the Republican Party increasingly has moved, even before Trump, toward this vision of they would rather try to suppress the votes of the emerging America than persuade the emerging America. That what it might take to talk to more millennials and Generation Z, particularly people of color, what it might take to talk to more of these culturally moderate voters who may be economically even leaning toward them in the burgeoning suburbs of these metros, which is where all the growth is just too much. They're not willing to do that. And therefore, they have to figure out a way to govern despite what I think is going to be pretty clear, a numerical majority that is coalescing against them. Don't forget, if Biden wins the popular vote, Tara, it'll be 7 out of 8 for Democrats. No party has ever done that since the formation of the modern party system in 1828. FDR didn't do it in his aftermath. Lincoln and his aftermath didn't do it. And yet, you're not hearing, apart from the breakaway things like yourself and the hundreds of former elected officials who have endorsed, elected and appointed officials who have endorsed Biden, you're not hearing Republicans say, we are being exiled from the places that are driving population growth, that are driving economic growth. I mean, Mike said to me about California, the Republican Party is now the party of the deserts and the rocks. And substitute fields for deserts, substitutes fields for deserts. And that's what we're going to see out of this election. I mean, you're going to have I think the politics of every state now looks very similar. You can draw an imaginary beltway around the metro centers of every state. And within it, as Rick was saying, the terrain is growing more Democratic. And outside of it, generally Republicans are still strong, but Biden is going to put a few cracks in that wall, in the Scrantons and Eries and Toledos and Youngstowns and Racine and Kenosha's of the world, Green Bay. He is going to make deeper inroads, not vastly deep, but he's going to make further inroads into the outside of the Beltway, the Republican terrain, and Trump is on the inside. On the inside, it is going to be, I think, just an absolute cry of repudiation. He lost 87 of the 100 largest counties in America last time by a combined 15 million votes. He's probably going to lose over 90 of them this time. And I think it's going to be significantly wider in the vote margin. And so Republicans are going to face this choice coming out of this. Do they want to continue down a path of, as I said, trying to squeeze bigger margins from shrinking group at the price of writing off the groups that are growing? No business in the world would do that. But it does tend to be a self-fulfilling prophecy because the elected officials and the voters who are most uneasy with it are kind of gone from the coalition, as maybe you represent, as the hundreds of Biden has more crossover endorsements than any nominee ever. Even Roosevelt in 1940, I don't think. Ever.
Yeah, it's
1972. And that is indicative of what's happening. An entire portion of the Republican Party is shearing off like an iceberg. And it's a college-educated white professional class that just does not see itself in a party defined by the kind of racial, gender, immigrant, the way Trump behaves and talks, and not just Trump. I mean, it doesn't go away just with Trump. So sorry for the big talk. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron. Fantastic.
We appreciate it. And make sure to follow Ron Brownstein on Twitter and read his columns in The Atlantic and watch him on CNN when he's not on The Breakdown. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you after the election, Ron. We catch up after.
Florida prediction,
Ron.
Rick?
Florida prediction, Biden +2.
Okay, there you go.
All right.
Thanks,
Ron. You know, Rick.
Well, speaking of places
he talked about Wisconsin. You're going to intro the ad. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that. You know, one of the states where we've seen the what was a Republican coalition starting to really fall apart is Wisconsin, which is why we have got a special edition of our Morning in America spot. It is called Morning in Wisconsin. Let's go ahead and roll that.
There's morning in Wisconsin. Today, hundreds of thousands of Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored, praising China's response instead of heeding the warnings, then blaming them to cover his own failures. With the economy in shambles, people across Wisconsin are still out of work, one of the worst economies in decades. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment, and with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in Wisconsin, and under the leadership of Donald Trump, our state is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
Well, that's just an amazing ad. Amazing ad. I think it's going to be the signature ad of the 2020 race. I mean, it's the coronavirus and his mishandling of it is the issue that we talked earlier about, the character case and the material case. This is what linked the two for a lot of people, and that's why this ad was so important. And even Donald Trump realized how important it was. It drove him mad the first time we put it on local TV in the District of Columbia. And so we've got that. We've got the character case. We've got which doesn't really do a lot for some people, just standing alone. But we showed, it shows how it has affected people. And now we're getting to the exhaustion case. I think people have just had enough.
Right.
And that's why you see all these.
Very true.
It's just he is, he's like the guitar or the amplifier in Spinal Tap. He's up at 11 all the time. People can't take that. And it's all about him.
What goes to 11
goes to 11, right? And he's on it, but it's always about him, right? It's the 11. He's cranking up the volume about himself and not doing anything for people. And that's the thing that's in the end is going to kill him. People just can't take it. They know they can't take 4 more years of it.
That's for sure. Speaking of not taking 4 more years of this, why don't we jump to another Lincoln Project new ad that I think captures this pretty well in the eye of a suburban female voter. It's called Pizza. If we could load that up, folks.
Who are you voting for?
That's supposed to be a secret.
Come on, you could tell me.
Okay, then. I'm voting for you.
What?
Yeah. I'm voting for the kind of world that you deserve. A place where people get along better and they care about each other. They like each other.
But you're not really voting for me, are you?
Yeah, I am. I'm voting for your future.
It's time. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Well, that is we love that ad and that series of ads. because they really do talk to something that a lot of these suburban voters are thinking about. Do I want to raise a kid with the values Donald Trump is going to portray every day? Do I want to see them see a role model who's a bully and a bigot and a yeller and a person who doesn't treat anyone in this world with respect? So we're very happy about that. But
can I say something, Rick?
Tweeting people. Yes,
can I say something about that, Rick? I got an email today from a friend of mine who said that she's a middle class female, college educated, who said that that series of ads has really touched her. She lost someone to COVID, and the last call ad that we have out there as well was something that she said just hit her to her core, because anyone who's lost someone and has not been able to see them in the hospital, or when they dropped them off at the emergency room, that was the last time they saw their loved one because of COVID restrictions. They couldn't be with them. That you're touched by this. And so hats off to the ad team for doing this, because those ads put it in perspective. This is what we're dealing with. This is real life, and this is really how it impacts people in their everyday lives. So hats off to you guys for that.
Yep. All right, folks, moving to the next subject, where you'll be treated also with respect when we read your tweets. Let's pull up a couple of tweet questions for Ask the Breakdown. All right, can you explain the dynamic of the Cuban-American vote and why it diverges from other Latinx communities? The fear of Castro-like far-left autocracy, still a legitimate fear, and so do they see it in Biden? I will say, as a Florida guy who has grown up around Cuban politics in Tampa and done Florida politics with the Cuban community in Miami, I can say very simply, Castro is still a figure, and the idea of Castro-style authoritarian socialism is still a concept that moves the Cuban vote, less so, I think, than it did 10 years ago, and certainly 20 years ago, but it is still a major factor in that. I will make a fair critique that the Biden campaign did not understand that they had to hit that earlier and counteract that earlier, but it is something that is a point of divergence, as you asked about, in both the Cuban and Venezuelan communities in Florida in particular. It is not the same driver with other Hispanic and Latinx voters around the country, as Mike can address.
Look, Rick's 100% right. And the way I think to look at this is a mathematical one when we're looking at winning the state. Look, he answered the question squarely. Every year that goes by, the Castro specter does diminish a little bit. There are times when reminded where there can be some over-consolidation. Are we seeing a little bit more Trumpiness with the Cuban-American vote than we would like? Yes, but again, let's just talk about the math. What we've been able to do as the Lincoln Project is not only kind of attack and mitigate more growth towards Trump with the Cuban-American vote with some of the ads that we've put out, but more importantly, there's just a huge opening of 65 plus and Republican voters that are breaking the other way. Right. So the question is, do we go after this 50% of the 6%, meaning 3% of Cubans that are moving towards Trump in Florida, or do we go after the 20% of voters that are 65 plus, where we're already at Trump plus, or have moved away from by 13 points towards Republican voters towards Joe Biden? The math is clear. That's why we've been doubling down there. It's a concern, like everything is in a close race, but I think Florida is probably sitting in a +2 position for Joe Biden the way that Rick said. I think that's exactly right.
Still going to be a late night.
Yeah, it's Florida. Florida.
Let's hope not. Let's take the next tweet. You say white educated voters are falling away from Trump. White wealthy men seem to be Trump's silent base. Can you comment? Mike Madrid?
Well, look, the numbers have been moving. Yeah, the numbers have been moving away from that demographic for Donald Trump since 2016. Are there some? Sure. There's some that we'll never be able to peel away. And again, keep in mind, when we're talking about these data points, history is made on the margins. When you can move 4 or 5 points away from this group, you're talking about a very serious incursion. Remember, the whole Lincoln Project is predicated on the idea that if we could get 4% of Republicans to shift away from Donald Trump and towards Joe Biden, we think that we can win. So the battle is, history is made on the margins. Battles are won on the margins we're beyond those margins at this point. The question is, can we hold them? But this demographic, as Rick pointed out, is moving in a way that we never anticipated a year ago. White, college-educated men are following their female counterparts, the lead of women,
Yep.
and we're moving the needle at a much greater pace than we thought that we would be at this point in the race.
Let's pull up another tweet.
Oh, can I ask George a question first?
Sure.
Sure.
George, where have you, as you've been observing all of this, where have you seen some of the biggest shifts? Like, have you observed, demographics that you didn't think would start to shift, but are starting to shift now? What have you been observing?
I don't know. I don't think I've been observing anything different than what the data points that you guys have been seeing. I mean, it's just basically just talking to people, and you just see, to me, an exhaustion among some people that I didn't think would be, I thought would stick with the guy. But again, that's just anecdotal.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. Let's bring up our next tweet. What do y'all think about the recent SCOTUS ruling on Penn, where they punted on making a definitive ruling whether or not mail-in ballots would be counted? They came 3+ days after the elections. It's COVID. Make it harder. Well, I think that there are going to be a lot of decisions that are going to be pushed through the courts very quickly, not necessarily the Supreme Court level. By Trump's side, they're trying to mitigate the losses they're sensing in swing states. That decision, I'm not an attorney. I'd let George speak to that if he knows anything about that. But you're going to see a lot more of that in the coming days. George, do you have any insight on that particular decision?
No, I haven't read the briefs in that case. It's a very tricky thing to comment on election cases just based upon press reports, because you can't really get a sense of what the issue was. People tend to look at these issues as, oh, well, who won, who lost? Are more votes going to be counted or less votes going to be counted? Are Democrats better off or Republicans better off? And really, the issues as they come to the court really depend on a lot of other things, like what the judge did and whether the judge had authority to do it under federal law, for example. I mean, basically, the way it works is that states are really responsible for the day-to-day operation and decisions about what the rules are, and ultimately they're the ones to blame, as in Wisconsin, for example, where they had the opportunity to pass some legislation that would assist people in voting during the primaries. That's really the province of the states, and sometimes when federal judges get involved, they get a little too active, and then it gets the Supreme Court slaps them down, and people say, aha, the Supreme Court is against people voting, and when that might not be the issue involved. So it's a little tricky to comment on all those things without having read all the briefs.
Sure.
Wasn't that was the issue between Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, right, George? Because in Pennsylvania, one was a federal decision versus
right.
Wisconsin, which was a state decision,
exactly
and
right.
that's
Because
why
state court decision, the state court.
Right.
Was it because the federal judge doesn't necessarily have the authority unless there's something truly egregious going on that would violate the Voting Rights Act or the 14th Amendment. The states aren't necessarily obligated to change their rules because there's a pandemic. Even if they should do it, doesn't mean that they're under some federal law obligation under the Constitution or the Voting Rights Act to do it. Right. It may be a good thing. It may not necessarily be something that a federal judge can order. On the other hand, state authorities can change the rules if they so choose. They can pass regulations. The executive branch of a state can enact regulations and change regulations if it's authorized to under the state statute. The legislatures, I think, have an obligation to act and change the laws to create the funding so that more people can vote under the conditions that we have today. And there's a role for state court judges in the interpretation of those laws under their constitution, although there's this arguable federal overlay that the conservatives are pushing, which is based upon a constitutional provision that says that the state legislatures shall set the rules for elections. That they're arguing that, that means state judges can't do it. And there's a lot of debate about that argument.
Right, right.
Sure.
Well, that's a conversation that actually George and I have on my podcast, Honestly Speaking with Tara, which will be out tomorrow. We talk a little bit about election reform. So George has some things to say about that. Yes, it was a shameless plug. All right. I think we have a live caller. Lenny from Tennessee. How are you?
Yes, I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. Welcome.
Hey, Lenny, how are you tonight?
I'm good.
What's your question?
I wondered initially who started this or who instigated this, which members were the first ones to step forward. And will you be around right after the election for a while?
Well,
I
Lenny,
can take that one, Lenny.
Yeah, she's in luck because you have 3 of the originals right here. Go for it.
You're in luck. Lenny, this emerged out of a whole series of conversations we were all having for a very long time. And when it all came together, I don't know if there's anybody that can take credit for being the actual founding father of this thing, but we are the sort of founding family of it. And we're all very proud that, we made a decision in the fall of last year that we were going to put aside all of our old partisan priors and get in this fight together. And it's been a fantastic journey and great friendships since then. And we have had an amazing journey together. And we're so proud of the support of folks like you, Lenny, who've been motivated and moved by this effort we've all been in together. And I will tell you this, you can count on the Lincoln Project. We are going to be here. This organization, the super PAC that we've built, the organization, the movement we've built, we will be here. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to wait maybe a day or 2 after the election before we start advertising in Georgia, because we're coming in Georgia as quick as we can. And I can tell you, it's not going to be for QAnon Kelly or Crazy Doug Collins. We are going to be in those states working very quickly. We're going to be fighting in this country in the year to come to push things that we think will strengthen our democracy. We need an election security act. We need a new voting rights act. We need to talk about how civil rights are treated in this country. We're not going to be fighting on all the standard political issues that some super PACs do. We're going to be talking about things that strengthen this republic, that make our democracy more healthy, more robust, more resistant to the kind of forces that came from either Russia or the alt-right like Steve Bannon. We're going to try to fight to make this country have a democracy worthy of the name again. Now, we're also going to be active in the 2022 election cycle, where there are still going to be a lot of enablers of Donald Trump that are going to be out there. And we've got what I like to call a zombie hunting license to go get them. And we're going to keep pushing on into 2024 because it does no good if we take out one nationalist authoritarian statist named Trump and another one sneaks in the door. Although I think right now the leader of the 2024 Republican primary PAC is Tucker Carlson. So we're going to have a lot of work to do in the future. And we're going to have a lot of fighting to do in the future. We're going to be here for you. And I hope you're going to stick with us as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Lenny from Tennessee. The bottom line is we're not going anywhere. Next up, we have Brendan on the line.
Hi, how are you guys doing tonight?
Great, Brendan. Where are you? Where are you?
So I'm in Central New York. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I have a degree in political science, and I should tell you, even in New York, I live in the Hudson Valley, and I went out and voted on Monday in the rain and still waited 3.5 hours. And then when I left, the line was longer than when I got there.
Wow.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah.
I love Hudson
Brendan,
Valley.
Thank you for doing your civic duty on that, and it's a great example to other folks.
No.
So what can we ask you? What? So what's your question tonight, Brendan?
So my question tonight is, how are you going to use what you've created to continue to bridge these political divides that we see in this country and bring discourse back to conversations around fixing problems rather than the kind of fighting over root causes that we see currently?
It's a great question. You want to tackle that, George?
Well, I think we just have to keep talking about what unites us rather than what divides us. I mean, that was sort of, I think that was the great experience that some of us have had over the past 3 years, is that Trump has actually unified us in a sense, because by testing the norms and crossing the lines that he's crossed, he's reminded us of the things that bring us together and the things that we are missing right now, whether that be respect for a free press or respect for the rule of law, respect for other citizens that we may disagree with. And that's, I think, I think that's a central part of what we have to bring to bear. And I think it's going to be more important, because, I mean, we talked about earlier how, and Ron Brownstein put it, like there's basically a piece of the iceberg, the Republican iceberg is just shearing off. I like to think of it as a distillery where sensible voters, reality-based voters who are informed, are basically being boiled off, and we're getting the Republican Party is becoming sort of a QAnon conspiracy-laden essence. And I don't see that reversing, because the people who could turn it around in the primaries are leaving the party. And so you're going to end up with this increasingly concentrated market for these voters, and who are becoming more isolated from the rest of the population, which means that you're going to end up with more crazy candidates like these QAnon-liking candidates from Georgia and Colorado and wherever. And I think that just creates more of a vacuum, a political vacuum, a space in which we will have to operate, and will help us operate in trying to create some alternative to the Republican Party on the right.
I think you're right about that, George. Go ahead.
I think that was very on point. And with that, folks, we're going to start wrapping up the show for the evening. However, we have a few more things for you. As you know, the president is traveling around on his COVID palooza right now. We looked at a couple different ways to express it. We thought about some scientific graphics. We thought about some cool charts. But instead, we thought we'd just bring you the COVID spreader.
This is the COVID spreader. Watch him lumber along with his friend. The COVID spreader is pretty crazy. It has no regard for any other person whatsoever. Oh, and look at all the COVID spreaders in the garden, spreading it all over the place. That's nasty. Ooh, look at this COVID spreader. He don't give a shit. Look at his wet little nose. Oh, look how he burrows that wet little nose in. Get in there, COVID spreader. Oh no, look at this crazy COVID spreader. This one don't give a fuck. She just yells and yells and yells. What is she yelling now?
The best is yet to come!
Ew, that is so nasty. This nasty one wants her COVID everywhere. Ooh, here's a den of COVID spreaders flipping their hair around all over the place. COVID spreaders don't care. COVID spreaders flip their hair around wherever they want. They don't give a shit. Oh, and there she is. Look at the queen. COVID spreader is looking around to see where she can spray it. Ew, it's gonna be all over the place. Oh, look, here's a fierce battle between COVID spreader and this nice COVID-free gentleman. He's nice and healthy, but COVID spreader don't care. Look at him yelling and launching his droplets. He don't care. Oh, he's just launching his COVID rockets at him. He don't give a fuck. Look at this COVID spreader. Ew, a fly just dropped right on his head there. He's just living on his head right now, but COVID spreader don't care. COVID spreader don't care if a fly lives on his head. Oh, look at where he is now. He's way up high now. If COVID spreader wants to go way up high, he just does it. Nobody's gonna tell him what to do. COVID spreader has sharp, tiny claws that he uses to put his nasty infected mask away in his pocket hole. Get in there, mask. COVID spreader don't need you. At nighttime, the COVID spreader goes begging. He just goes wherever he wants and begs. Let's see what he has to say this time.
I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss.
Ew, oh my god, that's nasty, COVID spreader. You're nasty. But COVID spreader don't care. Look at him dancing. COVID spreader don't care if they die. He just dances. He don't give a fuck. COVID spreader likes to punch people when he dances. Oh, look at him go. He gives them the COVID and then he punches them with his tiny little hands. And of course, what's everyone going to take home with them tonight besides this nasty image? COVID, the Covey spreader.
That's all you, Rick Wilson.
Folks, I can't help. It's all me. I can't help it. I can't help it. Once again, proving I am 12 years old.
Oh my goodness, Covey spreaders. On that note, I'm going to say thank you to George Conway, who is not a Covey spreader. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you again next week sometime, I believe. And thank you to Mike Madrid, always spitting the knowledge on the state of the race, and we will be seeing more of him as well. Before we go, I want to give a shout out to one of our super fans, one of our YouTube super fans. Her name is Sister Soul. Now, she'd recently took some vacation because she recently had a loss, so she was away for a little while, and we're sorry for that loss. But she's back now this week, and we're so glad to have you. Sister Soul, welcome back. Thank you for hanging out with us in the chat room and continuing to support Lincoln Project. So I'd like to give a shout out to our super fan. Yeah, see, we even made a graphic for you. So we'll continue to shout out our LP super fans because
who's up next for the graphic?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We got a Tiki graphic, we got a super fan graphic. This is, shout out to the production team. Rick?
Tara, one last thing for tonight, folks, before we show you a clip from the podcast. Tune in during the day at 2:30 East Coast time, 11:30 Pacific time, to join our friend Jennifer Horn's show, Vote for America. They have terrific guests, tons of information on the campaign. It's a great conversation. We really encourage you to tune in, and because every day they've got something terrific.
Absolutely. And again, a big thank you to tonight's guests, Ron Brownstein, George Conway, and our bestie, Mike Madrid. Be sure to tune in to tomorrow night's show. It's Friday, so we get a little looser around here on LPTV. We've got Reed Galen, we have Fred Wellman, and we have Zach. Zach Chakowski is back with us tomorrow, back by popular demand.
Zach's back.
Yes. And then we're also going to talk to Matt Kaufman, who spent his entire career with Focus on the Family. Remember them? And he just wrote a piece for The Bulwark called Why Christians Should Dump Trump. So that should be an interesting conversation. So before we leave you tonight, we have a clip from the podcast with Ron Steslow and Zach Attack. Zach Chakowski talking about why we need to be patient about Pennsylvania and why the results may not come out right away. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.
Good night, guys.
One thing that I want to put on everybody's radar is that the likelihood of the election being called in Pennsylvania on election night is relatively slim. If it's a big Biden lead, then it's possible, but in all likelihood, most ballots, about only half of the ballots are going to be counted on election day. So again, it's got to be a big lead for us to know for sure.
Right.
We should expect to have to wait a little bit, but it's worth the wait because that means every ballot's going to get counted.
Hi, honey. Mommy.
You asked me to wake you and tell you what happened in the election.
Who won?
Trump. Trump won.
But I thought you could only be president 2 times.
Not anymore.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Donald Trump is not a racist. If he was in fact that, we would have tons and tons of his employees coming out and giving us evidence.
There actually have been cases of racism against Donald Trump. In the 70s, he was sued for housing discrimination because they wouldn't rent to black renters in his apartments in New York City. Black dealers sued the Trump organization for discrimination, for workplace discrimination in Atlantic City.
When you say Donald Trump said he suggested Second Amendment folks take arms up, he never said that.
I'm sorry, but unless you're claiming that the Secret Service are a bunch of morons, they interpreted it in a way enough that they had to get involved. So stop insulting our intelligence that nobody, we're all a bunch of crazies, that it could have been interpreted in a certain way.
Liberals like you completely take him out of context.
The idea of me being a liberal, which is about the 4th time you've tried that little tactic, Haley, and I think it's hilarious and pathetic, actually, because if you had a resume like mine, you actually know what a conservative was. And if you knew what conservatism was, you wouldn't be supporting Donald Trump.
Tara, do you know that you are defaming someone? You could actually be brought into court for alleging that he did something that he did not do. So, Tara, no, you're not, Tara, but I would watch your words because that's a violation of the highest principle of journal ethics.
Are you kidding me?
It's a violation of our criminal justice system to presume someone guilty on TV when there are 2 varying accounts.
So you're not concerned about Donald Trump's words when he lies in one sentence. He says one thing and then says something else. You're not concerned about Donald Trump when he says that women should be punished for having abortions and then changes his mind 3 times later, after 2 hours when he got in trouble for it.
I haven't been asked about that, so don't put words into my mouth when I haven't been asked about that subject.
Because you consistently defend the indefensible with Donald Trump, and you're doing it again today. No.
Lock them all up.
Donald Trump has been inciting audiences for decades.
When you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people.
Now, for the first time, all of his hits have been collected in one place.
It's a rigged election. It's the only way we're going to lose.
Donco Records presents the inspirational favorites of Donald J. Trump. 45 hits from 45 himself.
We're rounding the turn, and we are coming around. It's going away anyway. We're rounding that curve.
With unforgettable favorites like...
I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything.
Get Donald J. Trump's race baiting on 12 CDRs, 45 records, or 128 singles.
Barack Hussein Obama. Barack Hussein Obama. Barack Hussein Obama. I'm the least racist person in this room.
You'll cherish this corpus of babbling rage forever.
COVID, 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 COVID.
But wait, there's more. Order now and you'll receive Donald Trump Sings the Songs of Love. Absolutely free as our gift to you.
Just received a beautiful letter from Kim Jong-un, and then we fell in love. Okay? No, really. I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and the suburban women. Will you please like me?
So please, call now for Donald Trump's inspirational favorites. Or send $45.98 for 12 CDRs in cracked slimline cases. To order, call 201-3 201-305-9163. That's 201-305-9163.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.